Begin today the Gemara on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph at the Mishnah. Sagt Heilige Mishnah, Ha'isha shenadra ben-Nazir. A woman took upon herself to be a Nazir. V'hoisa shoysa b'yayin. And she wasn't keeping her Naziris. She was drinking wine, metama lemezim, and she becomes tamei. So So she gets malchus for this. We already had this quoted in the Gemara before, and there the Gemara said, at least according to Wamshat, that this part of the Mishnah is really pashut. There's no chiddush. It's just teaching it because of the next case where there's an argument about this. Hafala baila, in a case where the husband nullified her naziris, but vihila yada shafala baila. She's unaware that her husband nullified the naziris. V'aisa sheisa b'yayin u'metam l'meisim, and she's not keeping her naziris, drinking wine and becoming tamei. Eina sefeges asarbaim. She doesn't get malchus because the fact is she didn't break her naziris. She's not a nazir, even though she thought that she's doing an aveda, but she's not. But Rabbi Yehuda, regarding this case, Rabbi Yehuda says, Eina sefeges asarbaim. Even if it's true that you can't give her malchus, she didn't minatayra. The fact is she did not break her naziris, but tispoig makis mardis. But nevertheless, she gets a different type of malchus, midrabanan. She's called makis mardis. Mardis means that she rebelled against the Eibishter. Or others say mardis means yiridui, means to punish her. Either way, the point is that she gets a malchus midrabanan for not keeping her naziris when she thought that it is naziris. She wasn't aware that it was nullified. So we learned in the Braise the source where Chazal darshan this concept that she deserves a punishment in such a case, because the pasuk says Isha hafeiram, her husband nullified her nedarim. V'Hashem yislach, and Hashem should forgive her. So the question is, Isha. So what is this pasuk talking about? Why does she need be forgiven if her husband already nullified her nedarim? So if she's not keeping her nedarim, there's no problem. No, there's no neder. So the pshat is like the case of our Mishnah. Isha shahafar la baila, a woman that the husband nullified the neder, v'hi lo yada, and she didn't know, she was unaware that the husband nullified her neder. Our customer dawa, that's what the pasuk is speaking about. She wasn't keeping her neder, but she thought she still has a neder. Shehi tzricha kapara slicha. She still needs an atonement, a forgiving that is for not keeping her neder, even though there was no neder. And when Rabbi Akiva came to this pasuk, Hoya Beicher, Rabbi Akiva would cry, and he would say as follows: if a situation of a person that intended to sin, he intended to eat basar chazer, pork, and instead the Eibishter made it that he's eating lamb. So ton kaparas liche. So from this case of nedarim here, we could see that if such a person eats still a kapara, same like by the neder. She wanted to do an aveda, but really it turns out not to be an aveda. So in such a case, you need a kapara. A person that intends to sin and he actually ends up sinning, Allah has kama v'kama. Most definitely, he needs a kapara for his bad intention and for the bad action that he did. A similar thing, you can darshan from a different pasuk. This is by the pasuk which speaks about a korban osham. So what does it say? V'lo yada, the person did an aveda, but it was unknown to him. V'oshem, and v'nosa avayna, he carries his sin. He needs a kapara for this. So now this is part of the same Braise here. Rabbi Akiva speaking. So he darshans and says, what's the case? When is a person chayiv an osham? A person that he intended to eat a lamb meat, and instead he ate basar chazer. What's the case that the pasuk is actually talking about regarding the osham? Kogain chatiche safik shel suman, safik shel chaylev. There's a piece of meat on the table, and it's a safik. It's unclear whether it's fats that's not allowed to eat or it's fats that is allowed to eat. So the person doesn't know. He thinks that it's shuman, that it's just fats that's allowed to be eaten. Omakra, the pasuk says, that this person carries his sin if he goes ahead and eats it, and then he realizes that he ate something that it's not clear if it's chaylev or shuman. So, mishan iskavan lalas biyadei basar chazer v'ala biyadei basar chazer. A person that has a piece of meat on the table that's not kosher, and he intends to eat it, and he goes ahead and eats it. Allah has kama v'kama. Most definitely, he needs a slicha, a kapara for this. He needs to be forgiven for this. So, as the Rishonim Taisvis say that the main chiddush that Rabbi Akiva is saying, as you'll see here the contrast in a second to the next opinion, that Yechayiv and a carbon asham in a case where you even have just one piece of meat on the table, and you thought that it's shuman, you didn't know that the person doesn't know what it is, if it's shuman or if it's chaylev, and he thinks that he's eating shuman. He's not sure what he ate, not sure, and he thinks that he ate shuman, even with one piece. Okay, but now the Gemara brings another opinion here. Isi ben Yehuda says, now but Pashtus it looks like Isi ben Yehuda is arguing, but from the continuation of the Gemara and according to the Rosh, he's not really arguing, he's just adding another case. He says, when it says in the pasuk, "V'lo yoda v'oshem v'nasa v'inai," so in our Gemara, it quotes the same pasuk that Rabbi Akiva quoted before, but according to the Rosh, there's actually a different pasuk that Isi ben Yehuda is speaking about, a similar pasuk that says there later in the parasha, and it says there, look on the side of the Gemara, they bring it here in this Gemara, "V'hu lo yoda v'nislach lo," different pasuk. So he says, what do you learn out from that pasuk? Ma mi sheniskaven lalas b'yodai basatle. He wanted to eat something which is kosher, lamb meat, and instead he's eating something which is not kosher. And what's the example that Isi ben Yehuda says you learn from this pasuk, if it's a different pasuk? If a person has two pieces of meat on the table, you have one piece which is chaylev and another piece which is shuman. Chaylev is the forbidden fats and shuman is the permitted fats. And what happened? This person went and ate, even though, so now according to the simple pshat here in the Gemara is, even though this person was aware of the fact that one of these pieces of meat on the table are asr, but nevertheless he went and ate one piece anyways, relying on the fact that the piece that I'm eating is kosher. And now he doesn't know what's the fact. Did I end up eating the piece that's kosher or not? So over here already, this is a person that's worse than before. Before he ate a piece of meat, there was one piece of meat on the table, and he thought that it's mutter. He didn't know that it's, and then later he doesn't know if it's chaylev or shuman. Here, he knows for a fact that one of them is forbidden, and nevertheless he goes and eats. Okay, somebody showing him disagree with this, and in such a case, this is already called a mazid. If you know for a fact that one of the pieces are asr, and you go and you eat it anyways, even though you don't know that you ate the one that's asr, you're not chayav an asham for that. Okay, but that's the simple pshat in our Gemara, like I said, that the person does know. He's carrying his sin. He has to have a kapara for this. Amaskavin, again, the conclusion is Amaskavin lalas b'yodi basal chazer v'ala b'yodi basal chazer. A person that intends to sin, he intends to eat basal chazer, and he eats basal chazer. Lachas kama v'kama. Most definitely, he needs a much greater kapara than a carbon asham or a carbon chatas that the pasuk mentions here. On this, those people that grieve, that have a heart to grieve for doing Averis, should think about this idea that here the Torah says that you bring a chatos or a osham and you need a kapara for this levels of an Avera. How much more so a person that sins intentionally has to do tshuva much more than this. Taisus actually here says, it's an interesting expression, the Gemara says, Yidvu hadovim. Taisus says it's a Rasha Tevis, the psukim that was just quoted before in the Gemara, Yada va'osham v'nasa avaynai. So therefore the Gemara is using this expression because of the pasuk. Okay, so now the Gemara says, we basically learned out the same point 3 times, once from what it says by the Isha, for our neder, and then another 2 times from the psukim that it says by a carbon asham. Why are we teaching this over here 3 different times the same point? Tzrichen. We need all of them to teach it to me. Because if the Torah would just say this, that a woman that thought that she has no neder, again, a woman thought that she does have a neder, that is, right, and really the husband nullified it. And over there that she needs a kapara, I would say the reason is hasmud by a kapara slicha. The reason why she needs to be forgiven for this, because her whole intention is for Isser. So that's why she needs a kapara. Even though she didn't actually do Isser, but that's her entire kavanah to do Isser. When the person has one piece of meat on the table and he doesn't know, later it turns out that there's a suffix if it's shuman or chaylev. But b'shas he's eating it, he thinks that it's kosher. He thinks that it's just allowed fats for him to eat. So his kavanah is for heter. So loy boy kapara slicha. I would say that if afterwards it turns out that now there's a suffix what this was, he should not need a forgiving for this. So that's why it's saying that even in such a case, now that what you ate, you see that it's a suffix, you need a kapara even for that as well. A person should be more careful to make sure that what he eats is 100% kosher. If we would say this case, the ikke isura, So over here in this case, he actually ate something that could be, it is aser. Aval isha. But in the case of the woman, going back to that case, I would say the hafala baida. So over there, the fact is the husband nullified the neder and it's mutter. So over there, the fact is she did know isser. Loy boy kapara slicha. So maybe she can come afterwards and say, look, the fact is what I did is totally mutter, so I don't need any to be forgiven for this. That's why it has to say both cases. Now, the third case it mentioned, Isi ben Yehuda. And as I said, you see here in the continuation of the Gemara that he's not arguing, he's just adding another example. When you have two pieces of meat on the table, if I would say these two cases, that in these two cases it's enough for this person to bring a carbon to be forgiven. Why? Because in both of these cases you don't have established a definite isser that's here. In the case of the woman, there's definitely no isser. The husband annulled it. And regarding the case when there's one piece of meat on the table, it's a suffix. You don't even know if it's a piece of meat that's asr or not. Is in a situation when you have two pieces of meat on the table, one forbidden fats, and one the permitted fats. The ikva is surah. So you have for sure one of them which is asr, even though you don't know which one. But when this person went and ate, he knew that he's eating from a table that has on it something that's not kosher. So in such a case, I would say the kapara and the slicha of the carbon asham shouldn't even be enough. It should be considered to be like a mazid mamish. Kamash malon the loishna. So that's a chiddush here that the pasuk over here says that this is still in the category of lo yada. He still didn't know for sure that what he's doing is an aveda, and therefore the carbon asham will atone for him. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana says, so here based on what we just learned, that when a person does something, there's the action you do, and there's the intention you have. By the isha that didn't keep her nedar, and when her husband really already nullified the nedar, and why does she need a slicha? Because of her intentions, her bad intentions. So based on this, the Gemara brings, you find this concept that two people could do the same action, but the intention makes the whole difference. So Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mai Dechsiv. There's a pasuk that says, Ki Yisharim Darkei Hashem. The ways of the Eibishter are straightforward. Tzadikim yelchu bam, tzadikim go in that straight path. But upaishim yikashlu bam, and then the sinners they stumble, and going down the same path they stumble. What is this? How is it possible two that are going on the same path, and for one it's positive and for the other it's negative? Mashal l'shnei bnei yadam. So the parable is of two people shetzalu es peschayim, that roasted their korban pesach to eat it. So it's a mitzvah, right? But echad achla l'shem mitzvah. One of them ate it for the purpose of the mitzvah, and he has a mitzvah. But ve'echad achla l'shom achila gasa. Then another person eats it after he's so full, his body is so stuffed that he can't eat. That's what's called achila gasa. The person can't eat anymore. So zeh shachla l'shem mitzvah, the one that's eating it for the purpose of a mitzvah, on him we say v'tzadikim yelchu bam, that he's a tzaddik, he's going in the ways of Hashem, doing a mitzvah. V'zeh shachla l'shem achila gasa, but the one that ate it and he's so stuffed, and therefore this is not a proper achila, upaishim yikashlu bam. This is a person that he's sinning, he's stumbling by this. He's not fulfilling the mitzvah of carbon pesach. So on this Pshat, Reish Lakish asks, so this is what? This was quoted in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So Amalei Reish Lakish said, no, it's not high. Rasha Kadeslay. This person that ate the carbon Pesach, when he was so full, so stuffed, and he still went and ate the carbon Pesach, you're referring to him as a Rasha. He, the loy ka'avid mitzvah min amufcher. True, he didn't fulfill the mitzvah in the perfect way, but Pesach miya ka'avid, but he is eating the carbon Pesach, he can't call him a Rasha. So here in the Pshat and the Gemara, it's not so clear how to learn the Pshat in this Gemara, because all the Rishonim over here ask that the Gemara actually does say in other places that when a person eats an achila gasa, it's not called achila. Stuffing yourself when you're totally full and it's impossible for you to eat to the point that you're nauseated by food. You can't eat, so that's what's usually called achila gasa. You takanaya to the mitzvah. So the Gemara here, it's mashma. True, it's not the best mitzvah. It's not the mitzvah min amufcher, but still he ate the carbon pesach. The Rosh learns pshat over here in the Gemara, even though the Gemara uses the term mitzvah min amufcher, but the Rosh says what the Gemara means to say is that he actually doesn't have a mitzvah at all. Because achila gasa literally means he's nauseated by the food, there's no mitzvah. But what the Gemara is saying is, but at this point that it happened, that he became so full, he didn't realize, he became so full, so what is he supposed to do now? He shouldn't eat the carbon pesach. He wanted to eat the Korban Pesach anyways, even though Taki's not going to have a mitzvah, but still, he ate the Korban Pesach. So this act of eating the Korban Pesach, you can't say it's an act of wickedness. You can't say that he's going on a pathway. Eating it is rishus. That's the question of Rish Lakish, according to the Rosh. Taisus says in the name of Rabbeinu Tam that when you talk about Achila Gasa, there are different levels. There's sometimes when a person is very full and it's hard for him to eat, but he's not nauseated by the food. So that's what our Gemara is talking about. It's not a mitzvah min hamufcha when you eat, when it's hard for you to eat. But when a person eats and he's to the point where he can't look at food anymore, that's not a mitzvah at all. No, so that's a different concept. So the achila gasa and ala soiva is not the same thing. Ala soiva means that the last thing that you eat at the conclusion of a meal, which makes you full, that when you eat the dessert, that last thing, that's the achila, which is the choshev star achila, because that gives the person the feeling, the best feeling that he becomes full. So you want to take that best feeling of eating and put it into a mitzvah. That's the hidu mitzvah of eating ala soiva. Achila gasa is after the person's completely full. He can't eat anymore. So therefore, Rish Lakish has a different shot. Ella, he says, what does it mean that you have a pathway that is for tzaddikim, and then the Rishayim go down the same pathway, and they're called Rishayim? Mashal shnei bnei Adam, so the parable of two people, Zeh ishtoi v'chesi imai, and this one has his wife and his sister in his house with him, and v'zeh ishtoi v'chesi imai, and the other one also has his wife and his sister with him in the house. What happens? L'zeh, so to the tzaddik, nizdam lo yishtoi. The Eibishter makes sure that he should not be nichshal and that he has relations only with his wife. L'zeh, but the rasha, nizdam lo yachaisai. The Eibishter makes it happen that by mistake he has a relation with his sister, which is of course completely aser. So zeh nizdam lo yishtoi tzaddikim yelchu bam. So the one that's living with his wife, so he's going in the pathway of a tzaddik. But the one that's living with his sister, so he's called, the Eibishter allows him to stumble, and he's seemingly going down the same path, but he's stumbling. That's the pshat of Rish Lakish. But the Gemara asks him this, midami, how could you compare this example to what the pasuk is saying here? Anan kamrinon chada derech. In the pasuk you see that you have one pathway, the same pathway. You could be called a tzaddik going down that pathway or a rasha. But hacha shnei drachim. This is an example. It ends up that these two individuals went down two different pathways. It's completely different actions. This is a relation with a wife and this is with a sister. It's not the same pathway. So it doesn't really accurately explain what the pasuk means. Hello, so the Gemara gives another example. Mashal l'loit u'shnei b'nai. We can understand this from the story that happened with Lot and his two daughters. After they ran away from Sodom and they came into a cave, the pasuk describes over there that the two daughters said to each other that, look, the entire world was destroyed. That was their impression. There's nothing left. So how are we going to build up this world again? So let's have relations with our father. Let's give birth from our father. That's the story of Lot and his two daughters. So what happened over here? They only had relations with their father for the purpose of a mitzvah. They wanted to build up the world again. So tzaddikim yelchobam. So regarding them, we call them tzaddikim, that they're going in a righteous pathway. But who? Sheniskav l'shem aveireh. Lot, he knew that the world still exists. So he just did this with l'shem aveireh. So on that we say, that a person that sins is a sinner, so he's stumbling in this. So again, here you see the point, the intention. Both the daughters and the father, Lot, did the same act, but it's all a question of the intention. For the daughters, their intention was the Shem mitzvah, so therefore it's positive, and for Lot, it's negative. In fact, the Gemara, how do we know that Lot's kavana was l'shem aveira? V'dilmehu naima l'shem mitzvah chaven. Maybe Lot also was doing it l'shem mitzvah. Where do we see that Lot did this l'shem aveira? So Amar Rabbi Yechanan says, Kol ha-pasuk hazeh. The following pasuk over here that we're about to quote, Al Shem aveira nema. It's all showing Lot's intentions, that he had intentions for aveira. This is actually a pasuk that says much earlier in the Torah there, when Lot left Avram Avinu and he left to go to Sodom. So the pasuk there describes Vayisa Lot. He lifted up his eyes and he saw the place of Sodom, and he went there to Sodom. What is this expression of Vayisa Lot? Every single expression in this pasuk here means an Aveira of Arayas. Vayisa Lot, what does the term mean? Similar to what we find, Vatiseishus Adonah Vezainah. Pasuk, she lifted up her eyes. That's by Yosef, the Eishes Petifar. There it's also Arayas, of forbidden relations. Then when it says here by Lot, Es Einov, he lifted up his eyes, Kihi Yishara Be'einai. I see her to be nice or beautiful in my eyes. It's also a term that I think this is by Shimshon Agibur, it says this. Okay, so Es'ena refers again to the Inyan of Arayis. Then when it says by Loit Vayar, so it's also like the Inyan of Arayis, like it says by Shechem, Vayar, Oisa, Shechem ben Chamoy. Uses over there the term Vayar. So it's this Vayar of Loit is similar to that Vayar. Then it says, what did he see? It's called Kikar Yarden. He saw the entire area near the Yarden. So this term is Kikar, is also connected to Znus. As it says in a different pasuk, Ba'ad Isha Zayna ad Kikar Lechem. So the Torah uses this term of Isha Zayna, and it says Kikar Lechem, a loaf of bread. So the term Kikar, that it says it's an unusual lashon, Kikar Ayarden. So this lashon of Kikar Ayarden means that the light saw a place of znus. Then when it says in the pasuk Kikula Mashke, that it's the Eibishter provided, it drinks it, it has good, it grows there, but it's also a lashon that shows znus. As it says in another pasuk, Elcha Achre Mavai. Noisni lachmi meimi tzamri pishti shamni v'shikuya. I go after the one that loves me and the one that gives me bread, water, and so on. Shikuya, the one that gives me to drink. So this is the kula mashke. So this is all we see, that light was all l'shem aveda. Frag the Gemara. V'hamenas honest. But look at the story that happened. What happened? Light got completely drunk, right? His daughters gave him to drink, or he drank. He got completely drunk. So what he did was something that he was completely unaware. So why are we saying that he's Rishaim or Paishlim Yikashlubam? Satan Mishon of Yesib Arav Chayni Lama Nakod Alva Vubekuma. What does it say there in the pasuk? Lo Yada B'Shichba V'Kuma. That the light was so drunk that he didn't know what happened. He didn't know of the relations he had with his daughter. He didn't know when he got up. There's a dot on top of the word Ubekuma and the Torah and the Vav of the Bekuma. There's a dot. What it means is Ubekuma Shal Bechira. Why does it have a dot when it talks about this, that what happened with the older daughter, the first time this happened? So he didn't know, Loima, what this means to say is, Shebeshichwa Yada, this, that he lay with her, that he didn't know, he was totally drunk. Avul Bekuma Yada. Well then later, afterwards, when he got up, he realized, he did know. So he did realize after the fact. So the Gemara explains, what does that mean? But if he realized afterwards, it's too late already. What should he do after the fact? What was? And so the Gemara explains, no, nafkemine, the difference is though, the lepanya achrine, for the next evening, why did he drink wine again? Why did he get drunk again? And it happened again if you realize what happened the night before. So therefore, he's called Paishim Yikash Labam, because he did stumble, this was his own fault. Darash Rave Darshan is another pasuk here that's going to be Darshan going on light. There's a pasuk that says, Och Nifsha, a brother that is rebelling, that's sinning, Mikirias Oiz, he comes from a very strong city. Or Midyanim means someone that's fighting Kibriach Armain. He creates separation like the bolt of that when you close the gates of a big palace. Who is this going on? Who is this expression of this pasuk going on? Ach Nifsha Mikirias Oiz Zeloit. This refers to Loit Shepirish Mavram. He was a brother with Avram, but he separated from Avram, he left Avram. Midyanim kibriach armain. What does this mean? Shehitul midyanim, that he brought about fights between him and Avram. Kibriach va'armain, kibrichin va'armain, like the bolts that you use to close the doors, the gates of a big palace. Right? Why? Because the pasuk says, La yavai amaini umayavi bekal Hashem, the descendants of light. Right, the two daughters that he had relations with gave birth to then two nations, Ammon and Moav. So Ammon and Moav, they are completely usher to marry into Klal Yisrael. Even if a Gadim that come from that nation are not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, so it's closed. Light is the one that causes that they should be closed off from Klal Yisrael. Even though in the simple pshat of the pasuk it says that the reason why they're not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael is because they didn't provide Yidden with food and water when they needed it, but nevertheless, here the Gemara is saying that this all starts off with the Aveda of light. That's really the cause of this Isser, that they're not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. Okay, but the Gemara says, well, the Gemara is going to explain soon the difference between both daughters. Rashi brings this also, but here the Gemara is saying both of them are locked out of Klal Yisrael. Darash Rave Darshan, another pasuk on light. V'teimer Rabbi Yitzchak, Ma'idich Siv. There's a pasuk that says, L'taive Yevakish Nifrad. The person that wants to separate from the Eibishter, so he looks for his own desires. Uv'chol Teshia Yizgala. And then his Teshia, how do they translate over there? Teshia?
Exposed.
Yizgala means it is going to be exposed.
His desire, his own desire. No?
Okay. So the Gemara teaches, L'taiva Yevakish Nifrad Ze Loit. Who is this one that's separated because of his own taivas? This refers to light, like we said before. He's separated from Avram. What this means is the embarrassment and the shame of light is revealed in every Beis HaKnesses and in every Beis HaMedrash. What this means is
Wisdom.
the wisdom. Okay, so it's that's what they teach over there. The wisdom will be exposed. That
Wisdom.
Okay, so in every Beis HaKnesses, when you read the pasuk in Shul, you read the Kriyas HaTorah, Lo Yavi Amoni Amovi B'Kal Hashem. That reveals the embarrassment of light that his descendants can't marry into Klal Yisrael. And in every Beis Medrash, when you learn this halacha and a Mishnah and Gemara that they can't marry into Klal Yisrael, that all revealed. The Tanan, it's learned in the Mishnah as well. Amaynu Mayavi Asurin, they're also to marry into Klal Yisrael. V'Isuran Issa Eilam, and this Issa is forever. This is the embarrassment that's of light that's revealed. Omar Ola said. Again, this is going back to the point that we said that the intention of a person in the act that he does matters sometimes even more than the action itself. Tamar Zinsa. Tamar, she was Mizana, the story of Tamar and Yehuda, her father-in-law, and she was Mizana, and Zimri Zina. And then we have the story in Parshas Pinchas where Zimri ben Solo, one of the Nisim, so he went and he was Mizana with a girl from Midian. But there's a huge difference between them. Tamar Zinsa, Yatsa Mimena, Melachim, Unavim. From that was born her children that then came out, the Melucha of David, and then also Nevi'im, Yeshaya Navi, and David HaMelech, and so on. They came from Yehuda and from Tamar. Zimri Zina. When Zimri was Mizana, what happened? Naflu all of Kamar Avavis Yisrael. So there was tens of thousands of Yidden that passed away, that were killed in the Mamagefa. So we see that it all depends on the intention. Yehuda was doing it l'shem Shemayim, because she wanted that Yehuda should have descendants. She saw afterwards that he didn't have any children. But Zimri was doing it l'shem Avera. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Gedoyla Avera l'shma mi mitzvah shaloi l'shma. Doing an Aveda, but it's being done for a positive intention, and the Gemara will soon bring an example when this is not stamazay. Anytime a person just does an Aveda l'shma for the Eibishter's sake, soon we'll have an example. I mean, you have here l'chayda the example of Tamar, but the Gemara brings soon an example, but that's greater even than a mitzvah that's being done shaloi l'shma. In fact, the Gemara, how could that be? Rav Yudah Rav. We know Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav Lo Olam Yasek Adam b'Torah v'mitzvahs afilu shaloi l'shma. A person should always be occupied in learning Torah, even if it's not for the sake of the mitzvah. Shemitaych shaloi l'shman ba'lishman. Because even when you do something for any ulterior motive, not for the sake of the mitzvah, but eventually you will come to fulfill l'shma. Or there's a famous the Chassidish Pshat that the Rebbe always says is that the taich, the inside of the mitzvah, even when you're doing it shalei l'shma, it's already l'shma. That's the real motivation of a yid, is just a l'shma. So really that means that every mitzvah, even shalei l'shma, is bringing you to l'shma. So how could you say that an aveda l'shma is greater than this mitzvah shalei l'shma? If this mitzvah shalei l'shma leads you to a mitzvah of l'shma, or even the taich of it is already l'shma. Elos, the Gemara says, rather, you should say kim mitzvah shaloi l'shma. That it's equivalent. It accomplishes something that's equivalent to a mitzvah shaloi l'shma. And where do we see this? So where is this concept? What's an example of an aveda shaloi l'shma? Aveda l'shma rather. Chsiv, there's a pasuk that says the story of Yael and Sisra, that she went and she killed Sisra. So there the pasuk gives her the brachas, and it says, Tevaydach minashim Yael eishes chever akeni minashim ba'oyel tevaydach. That she's blessed from the women that are in the tent. Who is these women? Man nashim shebayil Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Those in Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel and Leah, that it says regarding them that they were in the tent, and they are the ones that bench her for what she did. What did she do? Sisera was one of the generals of the army of the Goyim that then were oppressing the Yidden. So she went and she had relations with him, and then she weakened him through this, and she was able to kill him. And the Gemara here brings a story that happened. So this was an Aveda, but it was an Aveda l'shma, to save Klal Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Yechanan said, Sheva b'ilis ba leisa rasha b'isa shah. She had relations with him 7 times to weaken him. And then, Shanema, the Gemara brings a pasuk that it describes, Ben raglea, kora, nofal, shacha, v'goyme, and the pasuk there uses to describe 7 different expressions that shows that she had relations with him 7 times, all for the purpose to kill him. But the Gemara asks on this, how could she do this? She's having pleasure from the relations with him. How could she have relations with a Rasha and have pleasure from him? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, no, she had no pleasure. Kol toivasan shel d'shayim. Any good, any pleasure that comes from a rasha, ein el ro'et tzadikim. For a tzaddik, it's something which is despicable for them. So therefore, there's no pleasure that comes from this. It's bad. Shanema, as we see the pasuk says regarding Lavan and Yaakov. Hishamar locha. Eibusha tells Lavan, be careful. Midaberim Yaakov mitoy vadra. Don't speak to Yaakov anything, nothing good and nothing bad. So Nazir, Gemara says, what does this mean? Bishlei mira shapir. Eibusha is telling Lavan, don't harm Yaakov. That we understand. Elotoiv amayloi. A goodness. If Lavan wants to give something good to Yaakov, why not? Elolav shma minov. From here we see toivasoi rohi. That the good of Lavan for Yaakov, it's bad. He doesn't want to associate with anything that's from Klippah, from bad. Shema Minah, from here we see the same thing with Yal, that for her it was no pleasure at all, and therefore she did an Aveda without any pleasure, but it was an Aveda Lishma, to save Klal Yisrael. Gufe, going back to the statement that we brought before, Omer Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Le'olam yasek adam b'Torah v'mitzvos afilu shalei lishman. A person should always do Torah mitzvahs even if it's not for the sake of the mitzvah itself. Shemitech shalei lishman, ba lishman. Because when you do a mitzvah shalei lishma, that will bring you to lishma. There's a very tremendous value to the mitzvah. What's the source of this? We see this actually from Bilam. Shebischar mem beis karbanis shehikriv balak, or actually Balak. It says Balak Arasha here. It says the Balak when he brought Bilam to come and to speak against the Yidden. So Balak brought 42 karbanis. It's different. He brought 7 karbanis again and again. That's the total of 42 karbanis. Zacha v'yatza mimenu rus. So, but he brought karbanis. So he was bringing karbanis for the Eibishter. So, but those karbanis, even though it was done with a negative intention, but nevertheless he did bring karbanis, and what happened? He was zeiche, and rus came out of him. Where do we see this? Rabbi Yisrael Chanina said that Rus was bas b'noi shel Eglain. She was a granddaughter of Eglain, which was Melech Moav Haisa, and he was a king of Moav, and this Eglain was a descendant of Balak. So based on this, the Rabbi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, how do we know that the Eibishter, well, this is actually connected to before. This is going back to the story with Lot and his 2 daughters. So the Gemara says we see from that story that the Eibishter does not skip to give a reward even for speaking more beautiful language, using more of a nicer words. So there's a difference between the 2 daughters. When they named their son, the Karise Moav, the older daughter referred to her son with the name of Moav. What does the name Moav mean? Moav means that he was born from the father. So that's not something which is modest. And she expelled that out. Amalei Rachmana, so the Torah says to the Yidin, Al Tatzeres Moav, Al Tizgar Ba Mulchama. That you should not go and fight with them in war. You shouldn't fight with them with a mulchama. What does that mean? Mulchama udulai. A mulchama you're not allowed. But you are allowed to be mitzar them. You are allowed to cause them pain, suffering. But v'ilu tzira, the Karise ben Ami, the younger daughter, when she had a son from her father, so she didn't name in such a way. She named him Ben Ami, which disguises what happened. It's speaking more sichanoah, as the Gemara describes it. Amalei, over here, the Eibusha says, Yidden al tetzurim al tizgarbam, the Yidden are not allowed to in any way bother them and antagonize them. Afil etzuru le'tetzarinan klal. The Yidden should not be mitzari them at all. Okay, Amar Rab Chariya bar Avin, Amar Rab Yeshua ben Karcha. Another thing that we could learn out from this story with the 2 daughters of Lavan, that la'olam yaktim adam l'dvar mitzvah. A person should always be quick to go ahead and do a mitzvah at his first opportunity. And this thing, very interesting, this is learned out from none other than these 2 daughters of Lavan. Going back to the beginning of the whole Gemara here, the Gemara said that these 2 daughters of Lavan, they did it l'shem mitzvah. They thought the whole world was destroyed. They wanted to build up the world again. So that the older one was first. Over here we just pointed out a certain immodesty of the older daughter, of the way she named her son. But the fact that she went first, that she had the relation with her father the first night, that she was maktim for a mitzvah. That's her a maila on her in that sense. And that is shebischar laila achas shekodma bechira l'tzira. Because of this one night, the older daughter was quicker a night before her younger sister to have a relation with her father, to build up the world again. Zachsa, she merited v'kodma arba dairis b'Yisrael malchus, that she had children, descendants that were malachim by Yidden 4 generations before her sister. What this is referring to is, as the Shainim all bring here, that her descendant from Maya, from the older daughter, who was her descendant? Rus. And from Rus, starting from Oivad, Yishai, David, Shloimeh, they were not. The truth is, some are not guided in the Gemara Malchus because they weren't all Malachim. Only David the Melech was a Melech. But from Oivad, Yishai, and David, they were great tzaddikim. And only after Shloimeh, 4 generations later, Rechavam, he came from Naamah HaMoinis, came from Ami, from the younger daughter. So just because the older daughter was makdim the mitzvah one night, she was zeiche to have greater tzaddikim that came out of her 4 generations before her younger sister that was only after Shloimeh HaMelech.